Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It's Wednesday, July 20th. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Real Talk. Ryan Jesperson with you. John Hicks behind the controls, the technical producer of the show.
Hello.
And we have had Wednesday, July 20th circled on our calendars for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've already been here in the studio for a long time, even though it's just 8:30 Mountain Time, 10:30 Eastern. Today, a huge day for us as we have officially released our first episode of our new podcast, Seriously.
Yes.
Hosted by Supriya Ryan and myself. How are you feeling about it, pal? It's going to be hitting the podcast platforms in the next couple of hours. You feel like you kind of like got over the hump? You feeling pretty good about the whole process?
Yeah, you get the first show jitters. You've also got, does everything working right? So there's extra editing and post. But that's a great thing about this. It's not live, so it's going to be gangbusters.
We're really excited about it. It's basically, for those of you that haven't heard about it, and yes, you're like, is he plugging? Is he going straight to a pitch?
Of course we
right out of the gates on the show today? Yeah, you bet your ass we are. At seriouslypod.com, you can learn more about it. We'll help you make sense of the week's news, and with the assistance, the guidance, the insight of the amazing Supriya Ryan, we're going to take a look at the top national news stories. A lot of them will be federal political stories, but national news stories, and we'll cut through the noise. So we'll help it make sense. What does it mean for you, as we say, on the soccer sidelines or around the family dinner table or when you're having beers or coffees with your friends? What do you need to know about the stories? How do they impact and affect you? So to find out what those stories are, where we launch off in episode 1, all you need to do is search for Seriously, Supriya and Ryan. Anywhere you download your podcast, you'll be able to find it on YouTube. And again, of course, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. All of the details at seriouslypod.com. So that'll be out in the next couple of hours. If you're listening to the podcast here on Real Talk, like most of you do, well, then Seriously will be out by the time you hear this. And so we're really excited about it. And that'll be every Wednesday, a half hour for you. So while you're walking the dog, while you're on your morning or afternoon commute, whatever it is, a half hour for you, bite-sized chunk every Wednesday. That's Seriously at seriouslypod.com. We've got a great show in store today. I'm very much looking forward to a conversation with the Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations. The Grand Chief George Arcand Jr. is going to join us. He's the Chief of Alexander First Nation as well. He was the CEO of Fort McKay First Nation back in the day. He's got a ton of experience in dealing with communities, and the role of Grand Chief is an interesting one. When he joins us, we'll get into it. The description is essentially to act or to speak with a single voice on political matters when it comes to that confederacy. So you're representing a lot of people. The context of this, obviously, the approaching papal visit. Pope Francis is on his way to Canada. He's going to visit Quebec. He's going to visit Alberta. He's going to visit different jurisdictions where residential school survivors have called that territory home for time immemorial, and he'll be delivering an apology on behalf of the Catholic Church. I thought this was really interesting. I did a little bit of reading into these papal apologies. I'm not I'm not a Catholic, period, but I'm certainly not a practicing Catholic. And I didn't understand one of the things, the nuanced details that I learned yesterday in reading about it. Johnny, it's interesting. It's not just an apology from the church.
Yeah.
It's also an apology to the church. So it serves two purposes. And I thought that there was an interesting perspective. The reason I bring that up is that yesterday we had a really interesting conversation, and we've been looking to speak. We want to be speaking with voices that really, like, for example, Chief Tony Alexis that joined us yesterday. These are voices of people that have walked miles as either survivors of residential schools, intergenerational survivors of residential schools, or people that are advocating for the thousands of people, many of them now in the advanced stages of their life, that were at these facilities, at these institutions. And Chief Tony Alexis, yesterday, if you missed that interview, you have to check it out. You can find it in our podcast archive. Obviously, you can find it on YouTube, too. Talks about how this is a healing opportunity. He says not just for Indigenous people, but for the church as well. He says that there's work to be done on both of those sides, and he's talked a lot about bridge building yesterday. So we'll pick up on that in our conversation with Grand Chief coming up in just a moment. And then Brandi Morin's going to be joining us. She's a great friend of this show, and she has just announced this morning she's just been awarded. This is an award of great distinction from the Native American Journalists Association. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'd rather just talk about it to her face. But this is really exciting stuff for Brandi. Some work that she's done, some reporting that she's done. You've heard her here on the show many times. Her work, as I tweeted yesterday, has taken her across the country. She was just in Wet'suwet'en. We'll get her caught up on that and pick her brain on where that story has gone. It's probably fallen off a lot of people's radar, right? These stories where we saw Indigenous people and those, the so-called land defenders, even non-Indigenous people in Wet'suwet'en, in Fairy Creek, different stories, different jurisdictions, but still it's people that are fighting against some of the logging expansion, some of the pipeline expansion, the LNG pipelines, other pipelines. Brandi's been covering those stories. She's also been talking to survivors, and Brandi's also been out at the Vatican. Remember, she was at Vatican City reporting on the Pope's apology back in April. She joined us April 7th. And so she's been doing a ton of work on the storytelling front as an independent or freelance journalist for a number of different outlets, which makes her situation somewhat unique. She's also got a book coming out, which we're going to be talking about, Our Voice of Fire, and it's a very personal exercise for her as a survivor of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue across Canada. This is a major issue, and she's using her platform, her powers of storytelling to get to that. Brandi's going to be joining us live from Toronto coming up in about a half hour's time on the show. We'll also take you out to the mountains, of course, as we do every single Wednesday with MyJasper Memories, and we'll be taking a look at some of the other stories that are making news right now as well. That includes an explosive report from Joshua Clipperton. It was reported on behalf of the Canadian press. That means a whole bunch of papers were pushing it out yesterday. And I'm sure you've seen it, especially if you have kids that are playing hockey, if you're a hockey fan yourself. I'm not talking about Matthew Tkachuk probably getting traded by the Calgary Flames today or tomorrow or the next little while as that franchise continues to struggle. This has nothing to do with the fan interest stuff. This has nothing to do with player movement or free agency. This is an explosive and damning report that Hockey Canada had an abuse claim reserve fund. This, according to court documents, it was an affidavit that was filed in an Ontario court, a case that suggests that Hockey Canada has maintained a fund. When you talk about Hockey Canada, we're talking World Under-18s, World Juniors, like the U20s, Team Canada and the Olympic Games. This is an institution in Canada. That is Hockey Canada. How many of you have the jerseys with the maple leaf and the skater cutting through it? I know I have 5 or 6 of them myself. A fund to pay for uninsured liabilities, including sexual abuse claims. This affidavit, Hockey Canada maintains a reserve in a segregated account to pay for any such uninsured liabilities as they arise. Uninsured liabilities include potential claims for historical sexual abuse. Now, the sport's national body, Hockey Canada, has been under intense scrutiny, obviously, since news of an alleged sexual assault following a 2018 gala in London, Ontario, involving 8 unidentified players, including members of that year's World Junior team, many of them who there's speculation are probably playing in the NHL right now. The odds are pretty good if you take a look at that roster from 2018. And then a subsequent settlement. That news broke in May. None of those allegations have been proven in court. One of the very interesting developments with this story is that some of those players on that World Junior team from just about 4 years ago are coming forward now. They're saying, I'm not one of the 8. There's players that are coming forward individually that have nothing to do with that story, let alone that settlement, that want to clear their names. And so now the interesting thing, by process of elimination, more and more people are getting an idea of who those players might be. What matters most in all of this is, of course, what it means around hockey culture, the protection of people that are involved in some of these stories, including these allegations, and obviously what this means for the hundreds of thousands or millions of young hockey players, boys and girls across the country, that are now looking at this, that would dream, that would aspire to play wearing that maple leaf. What does this do to your opinion of Hockey Canada, to the sports governing body, and quite frankly, the harsh reality of how organizations like this often operate. I suspect we're going to get some trash talk emails on this to talk@ryanjesperson.com. I suspect that many of you are going to have very strong opinions on this and how this makes you feel as a Canadian, as a hockey fan, as somebody whose kids may play the sport, as somebody who may have played the sport themselves. Obviously, this is a big story, and
Not
this is
good.
far from the end of it. This is brutal.
I mean, it's not bad that every big company has a fund to defend themselves legally, but the fact that I think the biggest part of this was that they were using some of the registration fees that people pay to pad this fund. That's just, it's a really bad look. Really, really bad.
Yeah. It is. So we're going to obviously follow that story as it continues to develop. We also wanted to remind you that, of course, we're looking for your emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and every single month we give away the Real Talk. We award the Real Talk Email of the Month, where we give away for free an official Real Talk studio
There it
mug. We
is.
mail it right to you if you're the winner of the Email of the Month Club. Why don't we get to the mountains a little bit early? I'm looking forward to that.
I would love to.
Grand Chief is going to join us in just a moment, George Arcand Jr., and we're looking forward to that. But before we do, because there's a bit of a tie-in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a viewer that's chimed in from Saskatchewan here, and we're really excited about this. They said that they wanted to talk to us about their journey out to the mountains, but before they did, they took our advice because they started. I'm talking about Rod and Leanne and Abigail and Kennedy. They're coming in from Saskatchewan and they're heading west. They're on their way out to Jasper, so they're super excited. And they took our advice, which I appreciate. Our advice was to make sure that they didn't drive by the Friesen brothers in Hinton. In Hinton, the gateway to the Rockies. And so before we take you out to the mountains, we want to take you to Hinton, all right? And so this is what they reported to us, and we really appreciate this. So they arrive in Hinton, and they check out the Friesen brothers, and they're super excited. You can even give me, like, the official Friesen brothers music, John, because romance this, right? Like they were so they were pretty excited about what was coming up at Friesen Brothers, because we had talked about like the beef short ribs and the sourdough cinnamon buns and everything. You know, I mean, people were really excited to get there because it's so special. And so they make their way through the store, and Abigail and Kennedy are allowed to pick whatever they want, right? And they're going to pack the fridge. They got the fifth wheel. They're pulling it out. I'm so happy to see that they didn't make their way past those cinnamon buns. Have you had a chance to try the sourdough cinnamon buns?
Dairy.
Tell me all about it. Oh, dairy. I can't believe I thought of it. What's the vegan alternative there?
There's lots of vegan options there. Incredible. We always hit up the veggies and fruit. There's just incredible veggies and fruit you won't find anywhere else. I don't want to say exotic, but just things that you wouldn't find at normal grocery stores. And the plant-based section is right after that. The freezers, the fridges, the plant-based meats. I can still have that big manwich at home and not have to miss that. I love having a big manwich at home, but with the plant-based meats, and we just love it. There's amazing lasagnas. You throw them in the oven for like 15 minutes. Just an incredible selection there. We love Friesen Bros. We're officially changed over now.
Yeah, you
Friesen
officially
Bros,
made the switch.
Now the official grocer of the Hicks family.
Of the Hicks family, I love it. And so this is a great start to the vacation, and we wanted to set the scene there. So we're happy to see it, Rod and Leanne, Abigail and Kennedy, and we're really glad to see that you two were able to make it out to Friesen Brothers. We just heard from Grand Chief's team, and he just let us know that they're having some technical difficulties, which is why people that long time listen to this show are going, these guys are buying themselves time right now. That's exactly what they're doing. They're buying themselves some time. We're going to take you out to the mountains in just a second. I also want to remind you that Athabasca University is Canada's online university. This is the world-class accredited online programs and courses at AU offer you the flexibility to learn at your own pace on a schedule that suits your lifestyle. This could be the perfect time for you to sign up at Athabasca U. Well, why? Why right now? Let me tell you. Because right now, you can study anytime. You can study anywhere. And so a lot of the hurdles that might be popping up in your way with regards to, well, it's summer and I've got a vacation coming up in a couple of weeks, or it's sunny, I want to hit the patio today, or something came up I wasn't expecting and I'm not able to write that exam or to submit that paper. It doesn't matter. You're in charge of your schedule, so you will not miss an exam. You won't be studying on your vacation. Athabasca University's age demographic is a little bit older and brings years of work experience to their schooling. It is never too late to go to school or even head back to school and finish that degree program. I have a feeling that today somebody is going to have this, they're going to feel this resonate with them, and visit athabascau.ca. You can learn more about the sign up, the admissions process, and then, of course, all of those programs and courses they offer. Just an absolute ton of them. The search tool is fantastic on that website. Well, if you've even been remotely paying attention to the news cycle across the country, you know that many Indigenous communities, many First Nations are preparing to welcome Pope Francis. Some of them will even see the Pope visit their specific community, including a pilgrimage to Lac St. Anne. We talked to Chief Tony Alexis yesterday, and a big part of this is going to be the apology for the church's role in Canada's residential schools. Chief George Arcand Jr. is the Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations and the Chief of Alexander First Nation. As mentioned, he was the CEO of Fort McKay First Nation. That's where he engaged with industry leaders and helped the community really take hold of economic opportunities. His fondest memory, his Mosum, his grandfather, taking him to visit with elders. That's where he first learned community, tradition, the understanding of treaty, and what it means to be a leader. We're pleased to welcome Grand Chief George Arcand Jr. to the program. Thank you for making time for us, and a good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Grand Chief, how are you preparing personally for the Pope's visit? I understand you'll be meeting with him one-on-one. How are you preparing for that?
I guess for me, I continue to draw on my mother's thoughts and my mother's commitment to the church, and my mother's sorrow for the things that happen in residential schools. So it's a little bit of a situation where I want to make sure that our survivors and people like my mother hear an apology, and that communities have the feeling that the Catholic Church is on the right path. And so my job, I think, is to make sure that we're getting on that right path. And I hope that I can do justice to my mother, who passed a few years ago.
So you're thinking of her as you prepare for this. Understandably, we were speaking earlier before you joined us about your role, which is a very unique one, and I would imagine a very challenging one as Grand Chief. When you were elected, you were essentially charged, right? You were tasked with providing the Confederacy with a single voice, in particular on political matters. Is it possible to speak with a single voice on matters of reconciliation, especially considering the stories of survivors? How are you managing that responsibility in this context?
The challenge, of course, is that we still have many survivors that are still alive today. And it's important to understand that our survivors right now are of a golden age and tend to be our elders in our communities. So not only are we seeking advice from them, but we're also having to deal with some of the mental stress and the mental challenges that they have as community members and the things they suffered through residential school. So it's really tough to have one voice, but I believe that our chiefs in Treaty 6 are committed to the idea that this event is for the survivors, and anything we can do to make this event a positive event for the survivors, that's the direction we will take.
Is there anything that you hope specifically that you'll be able to share with the Pope in person?
I hope that I'm going to be able to share with the Pope the idea that we only see this as a first step, and that the apology is a way for us to begin on the healing that's necessary. And if the Catholic Church wants to continue to be part of how we shape the future, then I think the Catholic Church needs to understand that it's a first step, and it's a first step in hopefully the right direction. And we think that having the Pope come and do the apology in Alberta, where there is the most residential schools, makes sense. And of course, we therefore have the most survivors. And I hope that the Pope understands that it's not going to be, I apologize and I'll see you all again later. It's really, if you're going to come down this road with us, we will go down this road, but it's got to be in some joint effort.
As you speak with other chiefs and survivors and community members, your family members, people around you, people whose opinions and insights and experiences matter to you, do you have a sense already of what steps 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 might look like, if there is a perceived willingness or a stated willingness from the church to walk forward together in reconciliation? Or is this more a matter of, this is a big first step, we need to take that first step and then begin this journey together? Have you plotted out a map, so to speak?
Yes, we have. We've certainly have had long discussions with the Government of Canada, and the Government of Canada has assisted with setting up a particular a section of their services right now dealing with Indian residential schools. I think the situation is that we need to first begin by hearing and understanding that there is going to be an apology, and hear the apology so that people can begin to forgive before we go down the path of healing. I do not believe that people can heal without first reconciling some of the differences that people have. I know my mother talked openly about, I really just want to get past this. I really just want to be able to say, okay, I can move ahead and not carry all those things with her. It is really unfortunate that people had to carry the things that were done to them in residential schools for so many years, and we just allowed that to happen in all our communities, and you start to now deal with some of the fallout that has created.
Yeah. There's let me credit. So there are things that happen behind the scenes, and I think that there are people, including those that work for the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations, that have really done a remarkable job, an impressive job of working with journalists that are covering this papal pilgrimage, this apology, to bring people, especially journalists and storytellers, up to speed on things like trauma-informed reporting. And there's a lot to consider, including the impact that these discussions, even these images, are going to have on many survivors. How have you approached that? What's your message to residential school survivors that over the next week or so will no doubt be on an emotional, mental, and perhaps spiritual journey? And what sort of supports are in place for survivors?
So early on, we suspected that we'd have to gather as much of the professional and technical support that would be required, because we know there will be an opportunity for residential school survivors to start to understand where they've come from, understand their lives, and really start to consider forgiving. And part of that forgiving is going to be releasing a lot of things that they've held in their hearts and minds for many, many years. So we knew it is important that we all support services that we could gather in Western Canada. And so as soon as we understood that the Pope may come, we started working with Health Canada and the Alberta government, pulling together as many support service workers as possible for all the sites, for all the communities, and for all of the online activities that might happen through the events. And then afterwards, we know there's going to be continual requirement for support. So I don't know if we've been able to gather enough support workers, but I believe that we are at least going to make sure that the communities are armed with the necessary support services and the surge support that's required. Will we have enough? I don't know. It's going to be a tough challenge because there's only so many of these people in Western Canada, and of course he's also going to the north and going to Quebec, so they're also doing the same thing. So we hope that we can muster up enough surge and capacity to help the communities, but this is going to be our challenge from starting the day of and probably a few weeks or months after. So
yeah, probably at least, right?
Working.
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the impact of the visit. Let me ask you a side question for a second. Are you concerned that there's? I mean, when the Pope arrives, we talk about Chief Alexis. I spoke with him yesterday, and he used the word famous. And it's an appropriate word to use. He says the Pope is one of the most famous people on planet Earth. We were musing after the fact, like, who's more famous, so to speak? Recognizable might be a more preferred word, but who's more recognizable on planet Earth than the Pope? Probably nobody. Maybe Justin Bieber. That's about it. And so it's obviously drawing a lot of attention. And there's going to be a lot of non-Indigenous people that are very motivated to see the Pope, very motivated to be, to try to sort of reach out, to get the photos, to participate. Are you concerned that there's the potential to overshadow the main reason, the driving force behind the visit? Do you have that concern?
For sure. I think there's always been the idea that Commonwealth would hopefully allow a little bit of that fusion to be released. So the event at Commonwealth was planned where people who have that commitment to be part of that process could be. But I believe that our ability to ensure that the survivors are front and center in Ermineskin and in Lac St. Anne, I think allows us to feel more comfortable that we're going to ensure that survivors will be at the very front of the line to meet and not hear the Pope and be part of the event. So I think there's room for survivors' families, for other people to be part of the activity. But at the end of the day, people also need to understand you need tickets for all these events. You can't just get up Monday morning and drive out to Ermineskin or Lac St. Anne or Commonwealth. You need tickets. You need to get certain logistical challenges fixed because there's no parking. People are going to have to be bussed in. So there's a little bit work people need to do to be part of it, including making sure they contact their regional Aboriginal organizations like MNC, AFN, ITK, and so forth, who have regional people all across Canada working to ensure that people have access. But I think there will be potentially protesters. There will be people who are not happy. But we believe that we've been able to garner enough support from all of these survivors to ensure that there's people in the front who are survivors, and those are the people we want to make sure they have the opportunity to be part of the events.
Grand Chief, assuming that there are protesters, and I think it's safe for us to say that not everybody supports the visit, not everybody is prepared to roll out the red carpet for the head of the church that perpetrated these horrific crimes against children, Indigenous children, for decades. There are people that will never forgive. There are people that have no interest in the apology. What would be your message to them today?
We see the Pope's visit to Alberta and an apology as a first step. We do not see this as an opportunity for the church to absolve themselves from what has happened. We see this as a way to begin the healing journey and part of reconciliation that we all are trying to grasp and talk about. I believe that the path we need to create is going to have to be a joint one between Canada, the church, and ourselves to begin fixing these things. And if we don't begin the path and building the new road, we'll never start. So we see this as a good beginning.
Grand Chief, I'm really appreciative of your time. I know that in these days leading up to the visit, there's a lot of people that are trying to talk to you. There's a lot of people trying to pick your brain on this and looking for insights into the planning. Is there anything I haven't asked you about? Is there any important message you want to make sure people hear before we thank you for your time?
I want to say that it's really important for people to understand that there's a lot of resources that are being put out to make sure that the Pope's visit is being seen as a almost a state visit, and I think people need to understand that there's some issues we're dealing with. One of them is the age of our survivors, but also the age of the Pope himself. So things like making sure there's proper roads into where he needs to address people, making sure there's appropriate resources there, whether it's water, whether it's support workers, washrooms, all those kind of things are all part of a big event like this, because most of it's being held outside, except for the Commonwealth activity, which I guess is outside, but still within a defined area. So I think people need to just have some patience with us and the people that are working, each of the committees that are working on the coordination. And I hope that people understand that we don't think this is going to be it. And today, after the Pope makes the apology, everything is going to be okay. I think it's an opportunity for us to all begin to figure out how we begin our healing and how we begin to ensure we hold people responsible and accountable as part of helping us with our healing journey.
Can I ask you one closing question? As mentioned, I mean, a lot of what you do is involves politics. I read a letter just a couple of days ago from an audience member by the name of Shane. He didn't identify himself in the email as Indigenous nor as a first responder, but his perspective sure sounded like someone who has a lot of experience in first response in Indigenous communities. And he was almost incensed that many of the roads, some of these secondary highways that emergency vehicles and private citizens have traveled for many years in such a state of disrepair. In his words, not even safe for emergency vehicles to be on these roads, responding to emergencies in Indigenous communities. He says all it took was a visit from an old white Catholic man to get these roads improved. He's pretty pissed off about it, quite frankly, and his message resonated with a bunch of audience members. Now, of course, whether it's the Pope's visit to Indigenous communities or the Olympics touching down in Vancouver or Calgary, maybe I don't want to make the comparison, but a lot of times people will welcome infrastructure improvements with open arms regardless of the context. But do you have mixed feelings about that? Where do you land on that email from Shane? I know you haven't read the whole thing, but the spirit of it.
So I believe we all need to do a better job in ensuring that infrastructure in particularly Canada and in First Nation lands are being upgraded, and especially in Alberta, where we pride ourselves in investing in the infrastructure that we presently have. But I believe that while this should have been done years ago and probably should have been done over periods of time, we still, as a community, welcome the idea that we will get some new infrastructure, whether it's a new road, whether it's an upgrade on a water system, whether it's a new particular facility for people to to go out and honor and respect our residential school survivors. But at the end of the day, I believe that we all have a commitment to show as Canadians and as Albertans that we respect and want to ensure when people come to visit us that we treat them as best we can. So I'm assuming, like the Olympics, like everything else, resources get put into communities and cities and provincial governments when they host these events. I believe Canada is trying hard to ensure that First Nations are being given some of that opportunity to get the resources they need. Has it hit the mark? I don't think so. Should have we done this a long time ago? For sure. But at the end of the day, the Pope carries a different piece of how the world is fabricated and works, and I think we're trying to just honor and respect that.
Grand Chief George Arcand Jr., the Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations, also the Chief of Alexander First Nation. It's great to see your face again, and thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, you bet. Always look forward to an opportunity to speak with Grand Chief Arcand Jr. Brandi Morin will be joining us in just a moment. I do want to remind you, we say it all the time because we mean it. We want to hear from you. If you're a survivor, an intergenerational survivor of a residential school, we want your voice to be included in our coverage and in our conversations over the next number of days. These conversations happen because of the support of partners of Real Talk, like local environmental services. You know, some people will say that it's garbage, it's recycling. It's not just garbage to them. Operating in many different communities, including rural communities across Alberta and Saskatchewan, this family-owned business believes that communities deserve better. Better service, better prices, more support for local causes. Let Local Environmental show you how they can help with front-loader roll-off bins, residential or commercial, industrial waste and recycling collection. John, as a matter of fact, I was just out golfing, swinging the sticks yesterday at the Ranch Golf and Country Club where we played our tournament back in June. While I was out there, through rolls the Local Environmental truck doing the pickup there at the golf course. I always love to see our partners working together.
Did you try and ding it?
No, I didn't. As a matter of fact, I was just teeing off on one of my favorite. You know that road right there where they had the St. Albert Dodge Jeep parked there to win that par 3 there. They had the Friesen Brothers grill there. That's where they were rolling through to pick up their to empty those bins. And so I gave the guy a little wave. I'm not sure he knew the connection, but I was happy to see it. Portable toilets, fencing, vacuum trucks, water hauling. They do it all at localenvironmental.ca. Hey, speaking of St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge, this is a great time to remind you that whether you're looking to upgrade, upsize your ride, maybe you got a new family trailer you're going to pull, maybe there's a new addition to the family that requires a second row of seats or a third row of seats for that matter. Or maybe you're taking a look at the price of gas and you're realizing that now is the time to downsize. They've got you covered at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. They value your trade. The pre-owned market is hot right now. You can click on the link on their website, either stalbertdodge.com, sherwooddodge.com. Check out what your current vehicle would get you in a trade. They're going to look after you. And then, of course, you can shop online or in person with the preferred dealers of Real Talk at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. And a big shout out to our friends at Eden Landscaping. Their crews, this is the busiest time of year for them, obviously, capitalizing on this fabulous weather as they bring outdoor spaces to life. Some of the stuff they're doing is a little more glamorous, right? They've got the water features and the outdoor kitchens, the stunning stonework, that beautiful stuff. And then some of it's just a little more gritty. The infrastructure that a lot of people need, drainage, excavation, retaining walls, repairs. They do it from start to finish. They don't stop till you're happy. You can get in touch with them today. Check out their portfolio. Ask for Mike at Eden Landscaping. Tell him Real Talk sent you. You can find him at landscapeedmonton.ca. It's been a huge 24 hours or so for our next guest. She's a dear friend of the show. She's an award-winning journalist, and she's just added another honor. to her mantle just hours ago. Brandi Morin is an award-winning French Cree Iroquois journalist from Treaty 6, one of North America's easily most prominent voices on Indigenous issues. She's influenced reconciliation in Canada's political and social environments. You've read her work quite likely in the New York Times, The Guardian, the Toronto Star, National Geographic, Al Jazeera English, which was the story that just won big, Vice. You've seen her on Power and Politics, APTN, and of course, she's an editorial board member here at Real Talk. We're honored to call Brandi Morin a friend. Congratulations, my friend. It was just announced hours ago. You're the winner of the Native American Journalists Association Best Feature Story Award for a story you put out there in Al Jazeera English. This was a tough story to tell, and I'm going to ask you to talk to us about it. But first off, Best Feature Story, elevated amongst all your peers across the country. What does it mean to you?
It's amazing. I mean, because it's coming from my own community, right? So it's the Native American Association of Journalists, which covers the whole of Turtle Island, which is basically North America. So to be recognized by them is a really huge deal. I'm still processing it, and they're having an awards ceremony in Arizona at the end of August. And I'm going to do my best to get down there and to, rub shoulders with some of the best in this industry.
Well, I was talking about you earlier in the show, just before we spoke to Grand Chief, about how you have been kind enough to share your perspectives with us, and it's not lost on me, Brandi, that you've talked to us about survivor stories with regards to residential schools, people you've spoken with across the prairies. You were just out speaking to the Wet'suwet'en people. I mean, this controversy on the West Coast, pipelines and logging and the expansion of industry out there. You've covered that. You've spoken to us about your work from Vatican City, reporting on the papal apology. You've told a lot of stories. This one in particular, this award-winning story, Canada's Crying Shame, The Fields Full of Children's Bones. It was published for Al Jazeera English. As the subheadline reads, Indigenous survivors of Canada's residential schools tell the stories of those who never made it out. What was it that in particular you think resonated with this story when it came to those journalism awards?
I have been telling the stories of residential school survivors for years, and the attention towards the Indigenous community, the world was looking at the Canada's residential schools when the graves of our children were first uncovered in the spring of 2021. So I think this particular piece kind of encapsulated, a lot of that. So I traveled to Saskatchewan to the former Maryville Indian Residential School, where they had found, I think nearly 1,000 more bodies of children. And I spoke with a survivor named Barry there who, was forced to dig a grave for a fellow student who had died there. And I traveled to Calgary to another survivor of that school and spoke with a woman there who witnessed her cousin die in the bed next to her. And they recounted these horrifying stories of what they lived through, of living through really these concentration camps for children. And, I think, the way that I go about my storytelling is I really like to intimately do that and humanitize, the people, the characters. And I really think that resonates, and it really makes real to people that there are people that experience these evils, that experience these atrocities. And it's mind blowing, that this has happened in our lifetime, that this has happened in a so-called, human rights democracy, a country that upholds human rights, right? So, I think that just the intimacy of it all, and where Canada was at, with the unveiling of these graves, I think, that played a part in why this piece was chosen.
We've had a chance to speak with leaders, which I'm grateful for, including Chief Alexis yesterday, Grand Chief Arcand today, and you also have been speaking with survivors. And while leaders have the challenge of speaking as best they can on behalf of an entire community or communities, you've had an opportunity to speak with individuals. I mean, who will ever forget the reporting that you did? I'm showing a video here right now that you tweeted from St. Peter's Square, Vatican City. This is, among others, Dr. Wilton Littlechild dancing. I think it was his 78th birthday, you said, almost 80 years of age, outside the Vatican, marking or commemorating the Pope's apology, describing that as a day of major significance. Of course, you've spoken to many, many people about not just the residential schools themselves, but also what reconciliation and what a papal apology would mean. How are you approaching the Pope's visit? How are you wrapping your mind around it? Whose voices are you hearing? Whose testimony is resonating between your ears?
You know, I'm preparing for an insane, week next week. I just learned that I'm also going to be traveling to Quebec and Iqaluit for the Pope's visits, not only Treaty 6, Edmonton and area, but I have been speaking with survivors again ahead of the papal visits. And there are, emotions across the board, emotions and opinions. So, this one elder from Samson Cree Nation, which is a part of MASKWACIS, where the Pope will be visiting. He's visiting the former Ermineskin residential school. The actual building is now demolished. It's just this open field now, and they've placed a teepee there, and the Pope will be going there. It's the only First Nation community that the Pope will actually be going to while in Canada. And I spoke with a survivor of that school, Flora Northwest, and she told me when she first learned that the Pope was coming to MASKWACIS, like she couldn't believe it. When she first learned of the apology, she had to take it in many times. She played back that apology in English many, many times. She told me that she broke down crying. And although she does have the mixed feelings, she is going there to hear it in person. She's taking her children and her grandchildren. And what she told me is she hopes that the Pope will take further action. And one of her dreams is that he will rescind the doctrine of discovery that was brought into place in the 1400s by a former Pope, which basically made it okay for European colonizers to come and stake claim to the lands. So anywhere where there was people that weren't Christians that inhabited a land, it was basically free reign. And so it gave way to the violence and the genocide of our people. And that doctrine still stands today. So she's hoping that he will rescind that. Whereas I've spoke with other survivors from MASKWACIS or, Saskatchewan, or even as far away as Ontario, they want nothing to do with the Pope's visit. They feel indifferent to it. They are still feeling the impacts and the effects of the residential school system, and they're just not ready. They're not ready to welcome him. They're not ready to be on that, that path of walking together as the Catholic Church is naming this visit. And there are mixed opinions, but I'm looking forward to seeing Dr. Wilton Littlechild. He's from MASKWACIS. This is something he's literally advocated for years, like decades, to happen. And now to see this full circle that the Pope is coming to his home community, It's going to be really something to witness in person, because again, Wilton is almost 80 years old and the Pope's old. And this might be, Ryan, the last trip that Pope Francis makes. He's been canceling other trips. He's getting old. His health isn't the best lately. So we know that this is going to be very significant and historic.
Yeah, Dr. Littlechild is a legend and just an amazing human being, an advocate. The work that he's put in and that many others have, even just yesterday talking to Chief Alexis and his meeting with the Pope in 2016 and presenting him with a drum and with letters from survivors and the invitation for the Pope to come. And now obviously that means so much to him that this visit is happening. And Brandi, I want to be clear, like I'll keep my comments here pretty limited because it's not my space to be in, but I asked Grand Chief about this just a few minutes before we spoke with you. I have no problem believing that there are a ton of survivors for whom the image of a crucifix or the image of religious garb or the image of anything to do with Catholicism or faith or the church would have such a triggering impact in instances of horrific and sustained sexual assault, other physical abuse, that there would be no appetite or no room for any consideration of an apology, and I can recognize that too. And I'm, you're the storyteller. Maybe I guess I should put this in the form of a question as opposed to a statement. But I just think it's so important. How are you finding that balance between reporting on the significance for people like these chiefs, grand chiefs, community members, survivors, for whom a papal apology means the world, and for others that have absolutely no desire to consider it? I mean, both viewpoints are obviously very valid.
Yeah. So I am doing a piece for Al Jazeera English coming up for people that really don't want anything to do with the Pope, and for them to express that. But for me, not everybody's going to like this, but it's the truth. I was out at MASKWACIS, last week, and I seen Alberta Transportation paving the roads, and they're only paving a certain area where the Pope specifically is going. And when you drive around the rest of the community, that community, like many First Nations community, I mean, the infrastructure is falling apart. There's deeply embedded poverty. There's all sorts of adversity. The suicide rates are off the charts. There's struggles with addictions. There is violence. There's and I felt like, are they trying to make it look good for him? Are they trying to cover this up or make this facade? Because what's happening and continues to happen. These impacts are impacts of the colonial violence. They're impacts of the residential school system, which ripped children and families apart. And our families are still reeling with those impacts, learning to be families again, learning to heal from being just violently assaulted in every way, sexually, physically, spiritually, verbally. And, that's why there is just this, so much chaos. There's so much beauty in our culture, and so many of us are on, this healing journey, right? But there still is a lot of these after effects. And so that really bothers me, that it just seems like, there is this show being put on, and will he really understand? Will he really know what those impacts are, and like that they're still ongoing?
Very well said. Brandi, I know that for you, as a journalist and a storyteller, these next number of months are going to be huge as you prepare to tour and sign what I'm sure will be thousands of copies of your brand new book, Our Voice of Fire, a memoir of a warrior rising. I'm grateful that your publisher sent me an advanced digital copy, so I was able to check it out. This is an intensely personal exercise for you. Portions of it. There you go. Look at that. First of all, before we get into the questions, how does it feel to hold your book in your hands?
It's amazing. Like, it's surreal, right? So I had advanced copies several months ago, but they're different. They're different than the finished copy. So my publisher at House of Anansi just came and hand delivered a couple of copies to me yesterday, even though I have an event with them next week, but she was so excited. And it's just really surreal. I mean, I'm blown away by the response. I'm blown away by the people that have been reading it and their feedback of telling me like how they couldn't put it down, and just the different like hype about it, and all the media that I'm doing, and the fact that it's going to be in every major and independent bookstore across North America on August 2nd is like, even in the US, like it's mind blowing. I'm going down, I'm doing some events this week here in Toronto. By the way, I'll be at Another Story bookstore downtown Toronto tomorrow at 7 p.m. But I'll also be on The Social on CTV tomorrow, which is amazing.
Yeah, you will.
But I'm going down to Santa Fe, New Mexico with with a huge organization called Illuminative in August to do a big event, and I'm going to Los Angeles in the fall, and it's unreal. But ultimately, I want the message of the book to get out there. So I share my personal story of a lot of the adversities that I've come through and being a survivor of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But it chronicles that, and it chronicles how I became, this journalist for justice and why I do the work that I do. And the message of it is hardcore, but the message of it also, I hope, gives, like hope and inspiration, and gives a look into the lives of our people, specifically into the lives of Indigenous women and girls, because so often our women are seen as undervalued or runaways or drunks when they become victims of this crisis of being missing or going murdered. And so I really wanted to to provide that look in for people. And so again, it's mind-blowing, it's a little bit scary, you're putting yourself out there, but I'm doing it with a purpose, and I'm just really, really grateful.
Well, it's extremely powerful. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that's read your work before, that's heard you speak before. You talk about, the word survivor is used, can I say, quite accurately, as if you needed me to tell you that. But I think that there's this sense in society now, people think that the word survivor is sort of thrown around flippantly. When you say you're a survivor of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, you talk about your time in foster care. You talk about your time as a runaway. You talk about your experiences with predatory men. At what point in your life did you know that this book was just waiting to be written? At what point in your life were you ready to dig back into that and to find the words and to put them out there for public consumption?
So when I ran away from a group home at age 12, and I was raped and held against my will by older men, after that incident, like I felt, as a lot of survivors feel, they feel guilty. They felt like that it's their fault. And I kind of like just tucked it away for years and years. And I didn't revisit that until I was in my later 20s. And I actually experienced a mental breakdown. And it took a number of years of that kind of thing happening for me to understand that I needed to get to the root of that and to other traumas that I had experienced as a child in order to fully and completely heal. And so I was a journalist even at this time when I was going through that healing journey, and I still am going through that healing journey because it's a lifelong process. But a former news director of mine, Karen Pugliese, who's just this this powerhouse of a media, bureau in Canada. She's a mentor to me now as well. Over the last few years, she kept saying, like, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I just kind of always brushed it off. But then about a year and a half or so ago, I just, it just kind of, sank in that, okay, maybe I should write this book. Maybe I'm ready. Maybe I can help people. And so I started writing, and everything just kind of fell into place from there. So that's a little bit about how it came about.
Well, it's incredible, and I do want to mention, obviously, Brandi, just for those that join the show or that tune in from our home city of Edmonton, I also just want to mention for our relatively, let's call it our local audience, that you're also going to be hosting in partnership with the YWCA of Edmonton, a book launch. Your first book launch in Western Canada is happening right here at Treaty 6 in Edmonton on August 2nd at 6 o'clock, and people can check out the details at ourvoiceoffire.eventbrite.ca. If they want to attend that. I know that it's going to be a great event. Before we let you go, Brandi, I know that obviously you're in Toronto right now. There's a whole bunch going on. You've just been named this award winner. I'm sure that somebody wants to take you out for lunch at the very least. But let me ask you about your recent trip. You were at Wet'suwet'en reporting for Ricochet. People can read the story at ricochet.media. The headline, Follow Colonial Laws or Go to Jail. We haven't spoken about this story. It's fallen off the radar a little bit. Can you bring us up to speed on what people need to know?
Yeah, so I've been following this story for years. So it's the Wet'suwet'en traditional people who are opposing the Coastal GasLink natural gas pipeline, liquefied natural gas on their unceded territories. And some of the land defenders there were just charged criminally. So there was a civil injunction that had been obtained by CGL through the BC court systems, that they were arrested for, blockading the access to the construction site. But now the Crown has gone ahead and pressed criminal contempt charges against them. Now, what's significant about this is because it is their own territories, and this is truly unceded Indigenous land, and it was, there is a Supreme Court of Canada court case called Dalgamuth versus and Gastaway that proved that it's unceded Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territory, but the details of that have never really been settled, and so these kind of projects are continuing to go forward against the consent of the traditional people of the Wet'suwet'en, and so they've been opposing it, and now they're facing criminal charges. So this is a feature specifically on Slato, or Molly Wickham. She's a young mother of 3 children. The youngest is 2, and she was defending her territory up there. She was arrested violently, at gunpoint with attack dogs and sniper rifles last fall, and thrown in jail for almost a week, along with over a dozen other land defenders. And she's now facing these criminal charges, and she lives out on the territory with her family in a cabin, and they just want to use this land, that their ancestors have used for millennia, and protect it. And so it's a story on that and how she feels, but it's personal. It's how she feels as a mother, and going through this and going against this colonial system that really is not their own. Because I think what a lot of people don't understand in Canada is that Indigenous nations are sovereign, and this is a First Nation that is sovereign. It has its own laws. It has its own customs, and these have never, they may have been oppressed by the colonial system, but they've never been, it's something that they've always practiced, right? And so it's a very complex, situation, but for them, they really, believe that they're fighting for their survival up there.
I remember speaking with Slato, I guess it was probably about a year ago here on the show, and just a force of nature. And Brandi, I just want to reiterate our gratitude for the incredible storytelling that you're just the amount. Even when you're telling us where you're going, you're going to go down to California, and then you're going to go to New Mexico, and then you're going to go to Quebec, and you're being equality.
You don't even know the half of it, Ryan.
I know. I know. Like, I follow you on. Everybody should follow you on Twitter and Instagram. I feel fucking lazy every time I see what you're doing. I'll tell you that much. And I'm not lazy, but
yeah.
Anyway, hey, honestly, when I saw the news this morning, it was on your Instagram that I saw the award that you won, that storytelling best feature story from the Native American Journalists Association. I out loud just was yes, like you deserve it. And again, and I know you talk about your peers and the incredible storytellers that are doing such important work, telling these stories, but you deserve to be recognized for it, Brandi, and I'm proud to call you a friend. We're thrilled to have you serving on our editorial board. Have a blast in Toronto, yes. And then, of course, we'll look to your reporting on this PAPAL visit over the next week or so.
Yes, it's going to be insane. And thank you. And it's an honor to be on your editorial board, especially because it's in my home territories. And I love the work that you're doing. So hi.
You got it. That's Brandi Morin, a great friend of this show. You can follow her on Twitter at Songstress28. And I saw that some folks are asking about that event, the one coming up in Edmonton. So we'll let you know. Again, you can just check out ourvoiceoffire.eventbrite.ca. It's being held at the YWCA's brand new office on 124th Street, which is about a 5-iron from here, if I hit it well.
Okay.
My friends might argue it's more of like a driver from here.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't play great yesterday. Out of the gates yesterday. An Eric Lindros on 1 and 2, or a Patrick Kane, if you want to look at it that way. I took an 8 on hole 1.
Mm-hmm.
I took an 8 on hole 2. And then managed to pull the nose up, but it didn't matter. The point of all of this is that the YWCA's new office is just a couple of blocks from our studio, and I know that that's going to be a big deal for people to have a chance to meet Brandi in person. She can sign a copy of the book, and again, our huge congratulations to her. Let's get out to the mountains. What do you think? Every Wednesday, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have an opportunity to, we never ignore the news cycle. We can't. We want to be informed and engaged, but sometimes you just need a break, and you want to head outside. And a big part of that is Jasper's legacy as a dark sky preserve. I feel like this is, I'll do my best with my words, but this is one you're going to want to watch on YouTube. A time-lapse video. What you're seeing right now is that Jasper sky, including the northern lights. This levitating movie magic will soon dazzle the Rockies for the second year in a row this October. So now's the time you want to think about it. Mark your calendar. The Jasper Dark Sky Festival will have a hypnotizing light show. Hundreds of choreographed drones moving in sync above the mountain town. What? The annual 2-week Dark Sky Festival runs October 14th through the 23rd. It will also draw a stellar lineup of space and science stars who will tackle the hottest topics of the day, like space tourism and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. New to the festival this year and coming from around the planet, authors, astrophysicists, artists. Edmonton's own AI expert, Patrick Pilarski, will be there bringing his research on how bionic limbs can help amputees. Such a cool area of study. There will be Indigenous events, a symphony under the stars with, of course, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, kid-friendly rocket launches. I think that'll get a bit of attention with the younger Real Talkers. And then live and interactive science demonstrations with the TELUS World of Science, stargazing using the most powerful telescopes in the Rockies, astrophotography, guided night hikes, foodie experiences, and more. Just check out jasperdarksky.com, or rather jasperdarksky-. John, can I try that again? jasperdarksky.travel. jasperdarksky.travel is where you can learn more about the Jasper Dark Sky Festival. Now, I wanted to stretch this MyJasper memory a little bit longer because we got this amazing message from a Real Talker.
Please, I'll take a nap.
Can we get into these Instagram photos?
Yeah.
How cool are these? We were telling you earlier today about the family that was in touch with us and basically said, hey, listen, we've got our own MyJasper memory, and we love these. We love when you're in touch with us to let us know exactly what your family's done to enjoy Jasper. And so this was courtesy of Leanne, and she let us know about their family's trip out. Her husband, Rod, and then Abigail and Kennedy, their kids from Saskatoon, said they were following a road trip plan. Saskatoon to Stony Plain to Jasper to Salmon Arm to Vernon to Nelson to Fernie, back to Saskatoon. What a loop. They said that Moline Lake boat tour to Spirit Island was absolutely awesome. She says we booked it after hearing about it on Real Talk and then viewing my wife Carrie Skelton's Instagram reel. She says it was just as beautiful. You can check out Leanne's MyJasper memory on her Instagram profile. I know she wouldn't mind. She's at Leanne WEWEWER. And you can find it, of course, there. That Moline Lake Spirit Island boat trip. Have you ever gone on that?
No, I haven't.
Dude.
What?
It is.
Take me.
I should take you on
You,
that.
me, this music? Come on.
Maybe we'll just bring
And
the live.
Lake.
What most people don't know is that the guitarist is actually sitting right beside me on
Yeah.
a stool.
Yeah.
Birkenstocks, hemp pants.
We really should give him credit one day.
We
Put it on
should.
camera.
We should give him credit. Anyway, Leanne, we love that you shared your photos with us. If you have a MyJasper memory, please do hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ, and your family's adventure could be featured a Wednesday right here on Real Talk. Now, of course, I mentioned I was out golfing yesterday, and it was just such an absolutely beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.
We enjoyed some sunshine. We were able to feel the sun hitting our face and our forearms in a way that it hadn't for quite some time. It felt like there was a lot of rain over the last while. It's been contributing to this mosquito-type situation in our neck of the woods. It's got a lot of
I've seen you on Twitter. You're going off on the skeeters.
But I'm not going to use this opportunity to grind
Okay.
to grind gears
We'll
or
get
to
into
grind
it
an
another
axe. So
time?
we can get into it another time.
Okay.
For context, those of you who listen across the country or outside of Canada, in our neck of the woods, our city council made a decision to halt.
So you are getting into it.
No, I'm just providing context. You brought it up. There's got to be context. Okay, so I'll get into it just for a minute.
I knew it.
But here I'm going to credit the audience. I'm going to credit Real Talkers because city council made a decision to stop some of their spraying programs, some of their mosquito spraying initiatives. And the mosquitoes seem to be worse this year. This is anecdotal. I don't have evidence of this. And so I just tweeted that I think that this program needs to be one and done. I think that they need to bring out the napalm again next summer and hit these things where it hurts. But not everyone has appreciated my take. I can tell you don't appreciate my take. And I'm not even totally 100% serious. I'm just sick of getting. There's mosquitoes in our house. There's mosquitoes in our studio. There's mosquitoes everywhere. But I wanted to say this real quick. A whole bunch of people have said, like, have you actually done any reading on why this is happening? Have you actually paid attention to what's happening with insects and insect populations and pollinators in particular, right? The insects that play such a huge role in food and in sustainability from an environmental perspective? And the honest answer is no.
The numbers are crazy. I think it's like 40% of insects globally are in decline, and a third of them are endangered.
So I wanted to...
A third of all insects in the world are endangered.
Yeah, but for a lot of... we don't give a shit about a lot of those.
But
like, if you tell me that a third of mosquitoes are
these
endangered,
little
that's
things,
great.
I know, but these little things, they are the inner workings of
They
the
are important.
ecosystem that you don't see. Like mosquitoes, for example, they don't even... First of all, a mosquito that bites, that's a mom, because they're only... The males don't bite. They bite when they've laid eggs or when they're mating, the mating season.
I feel like you're making this up.
I'm not at all. You can Google it. And also, mosquitoes, they don't go around eating blood. They actually pollinate because they mostly eat flower nectar, but it's accidental pollination as they go from flower to flower. So, and they're also food for, frogs, birds, fish, other bigger insects. So if they go away more, look, he's putting his feet up. No, but it'll make a difference. And I am from Ontario, where we had, growing up, rainy springs, rainy summers, and we had just as many mosquitoes as we have now. I think that's why we have so many this year, is because Alberta's had some rain. But come on, what's summer without 7 mosquito bites on your left
All right,
calf?
well, I guess we don't have to do a segment on it now that you've solved the world's problems and brought us all up to speed.
But what's summer without bug bites? It's it's like
It's a terrible take.
it's like a
terrible
tag
take.
of your adventures.
I just wanted to bring it up to acknowledge that it is something. No, actually, I should have known, because you're actually a thoughtful, contemplative, and informed person. So I should have known that you would have a strong opinion on this.
I don't have a strong opinion. I looked it up because I was interested when all this was happening.
But I do. I mean, we're just taking the piss right now. But I do acknowledge it is a serious. It's a fascinating
literally
story.
Googled-
And it's something that's probably been flying under most people's radar. And I appreciate the people that hold my feet to the fire on social media, because I'm just sick of getting mosquito bites, and I'm like, let's spray them again.
Oh, so's my life.
And a lot of people are going, there's more to it than that. Kind of interesting, too, because Wyatt and I, my son and I, are going through this book right now. It's called something like, I don't remember the exact, it's like the Complete Dinosaur Encyclopedia or something, and it's fascinating. It's written for kids, obviously, and it goes through the Mesozoic era and all these different eras and things like that, and it talks about insects in there. Did you know that cockroaches, dragonflies, and a few other insects predated dinosaurs?
Wow. No,
Dragonflies
I didn't actually know that.
predated.
I knew cockroaches
dinosaurs.
were like super old, like one of the first.
They always talk about cockroaches as like the hardest to kill, like when the world explodes, or
Nuclear.
at least when the world, the planet Earth will. Oh man, do I?
We're getting into it here.
Planet Earth will always be fine.
Oh yeah, we'll come and go.
Humans on planet Earth will not always be fine.
We'll come and go again.
Right? Yeah. The planet's been here for hundreds of millions of years. Or 7,000, depending on your... No. But for hundreds of millions of years, planet Earth has been here, and it's been just fine. But human life on planet Earth is trending to be no bueno.
Yeah.
And so that's why we need to take stuff like this seriously. So I wanted to acknowledge, I wanted to touch on it. It wasn't our lead story, but I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to let people know. Sometimes we'll tell you like what's coming up on the show, like tomorrow, like I'm going to do in just a moment. And then sometimes we want to let you know, hey, here's what's on like our working list. Here's what's on our long list. Here's some of the stories that we're keeping an eye on. We're working on interviews. The Hockey Canada story. Obviously, right now we're paying a lot of attention to the Pope's visit, but there's a ton of other stuff going on, and that includes that sort of insect extinction type idea. We're able to do this, and we're able to, quite frankly, keep our show on the air, as we say, because we have the support of sponsors like Apex Automation. And we've been putting the call out to engineers across the country that may, quite frankly, be looking to make a career change. Maybe you don't feel appreciated where you're at right now. Maybe there's not that career fulfillment. Maybe your own personal or professional development has kind of hit the skids. why not check out apexautomation.ca? You can take a look at some of their projects, the engineering, the fabrication, the automation work that they've been doing. They've got a great presence. They've got a bunch of Vimeo videos. You can check this out. I'm showing you right now the latest in high-dust laser technology. I want to do something with laser technology.
Working with lasers?
I'm thinking of Austin Powers. Or no, not Austin Powers. What's it, Dr. Evil? Yeah. Lasers. Yeah, they do lasers at Apex Automation. You can achieve great things, reach your full potential, and enjoy flexible hours, professional development opportunities, and a really positive corporate culture. You can learn more at apexautomation.ca. Hey, we feed our dogs Grand Dog Essentials quality raw food. It's why our 10-year-old boxer Moses is looking as healthy as he is. It's why our 3-year-old Lab Monroe is such a beautiful girl. It's because we tapped into the benefits of going raw. If you want to learn if this is a good fit for your dog, we recommend that you check out granddog.ca. You can learn about the family behind this family-owned business, why they made the switch to eating raw. You can check out the Shop Now link and learn about their beef and chicken, turkey, and alternative protein options. You can check out their blog posts. They have a ton of great information on why your dog may be refusing their food right now. And of course, you can place your order. The promo code REALTALK gets you 10% off your first one, delivered right to your door in Alberta at granddog.ca. Our hashtag RealTalkRJ is powered by the team at Park Power, who wants to remind you scam artists are out there trying to take your hard-earned dough. That's right. If you scroll down to the blog section of their website at parkpower.ca, you can check out their investigation, so to speak, into the phishing scams around the government of Alberta's electricity rebate programs. They've also got a great post on natural gas in Alberta. Some of these rates have been up and down. Families worried about affordability, trying to find ways to save money. Park Power wants to keep more money in your pocket. The promo code 2022-RealTalk gets you $70 off your first bill from parkpower.ca. And our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park want to remind you today's a perfect day to go check out their Summer Blizzard lineup. They've also got their signature stack burgers, including my personal favorite, the Loaded Steakhouse signature stacker. I love that it's got that onion ring on top of the bacon and the cheese. And then, of course, John's recommendation, the Poolside Punch Twisty Misty Slush.
Yeah, put a little vodka in there.
John... John, we can't officially say that.
Oh, sorry.
But it's not a bad idea. You can find them at the Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, Dairy Queens.
Ooh.
Coming up on the show tomorrow, we're going to take a look at Alberta's so-called war room. The Canadian Energy Centre. Who did they hire for their latest attack on journalists? You won't believe the connection. We're going to check in and talk to a Tyee reporter, Jeff Dembicki, who's going to join us from New York. He's the investigative climate reporter that's been covering this. Plus, we're going to talk to my pal Spicer, who was running the mowers at the British Open. What an opportunity. We'll hear it firsthand. See you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson.
Executive producer, Josh Dunford. Technical producer, John Hicks. General manager, Katie Cook-Shivers. Account coordinator, Lawrence Derlego. Human resources, Lena Shepard.
Website design, Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali,
Brandi Morin,
Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.